Happy holidays, everyone. Welcome to a special holiday edition of Apps Unscripted, Google Apps Unscripted. My name is Kalyan Reddy, and this is Dan Lazen.
I am Dan Lazen.
And we work on the AppScript team here in New York. All right, now to start off, we have an announcement for you guys. So as you know, the new Google Sheets has been recently released, and it's currently in an opt-in status. So if people do sign up for it, then they can, all their new sheets that they create will be new Google Sheets. Let me just quickly run through, some of the benefits there. I think the overwhelming positive there is it's faster and it can handle a lot more cells and a lot more data.
Yeah.
Offline
mode as well is a big feature.
Offline mode, so like we announced for Forms and Google Docs previously, now all that great offline functionality is going to be coming to Sheets as well.
Yeah.
So you'll be zipping around all around very quickly. If we can quickly go to the computer here, so this is the blog post that was posted on the official Google blog announcing new Sheets.
Just about a week ago, Dan.
Yeah. So there's some features like autocomplete function help for when you're writing custom functions, text reflowing, and conditional formatting improvements. But we'd like to announce that you can use AppScript as well with these new sheets, with some caveats.
Yeah. There's the new version of Sheets is really in an opt-in state right now. It's experimental technology, and AppScript still has a ways to go to fully support all the features in new Sheets and to fully support all the things that were available with AppScript in the old version. But almost everything's there, 90 to sort of 95% of the stuff. And we've put together what I hope is a helpful page that lists some of the known limitations.
So you can get to this page, AppScript/migration/Sheets.
And as you can see, it's in the sidebar there as well under the extending Google Apps category.
So basically some of the main issues are performance with doing batch operations. So previously you might be doing one by one operations, and then on the server side it would do the batching for you.
That is still the best practice. We're not saying you shouldn't do that,
right.
But you won't find that to be as quick today as it is in the old version of the new Google Sheets. It tends to write them out sort of one result at a time on occasion at least.
But we're working on improvements, so that should get better.
Yeah.
Another thing to note is Script Gallery is not available anymore in new Sheets. So if you still rely on the Script Gallery, we wouldn't recommend migrating your scripts over just yet.
Yeah.
Anything else particular you want to cover, Dan?
The table at the bottom of this page is quite important. It lists all of the methods that either are not supported currently or that have known bugs with them. The spreadsheet API, the spreadsheet service in AppScript is really quite large. There's a lot of ground it covers, and most things that we've tested work just as they should. But a few things are worth noting. The getActiveRange method, when used in a custom function, doesn't correctly reflect the range that the custom function was called from. So essentially, you can't use getActiveRange in custom functions at the moment today. There are a few other sort of minor things, and then I think the biggest missing thing is the entire data validation API is absent right now, but we're working on getting that in soon. So in the new version of Google Sheets, you can't programmatically create or even query data validation criteria, but you still can in the old version of Sheets. So stick to the old version if data validation is critical to your scripts.
Okay. And some improvements to the base functionality of AppScript in custom functions. You'll now be able to autocomplete those custom functions.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Just like the built-in functions that Sheets has. And to do this, you need to use the add custom function annotation that you would add in your JS doc.
Yeah. The other information shown in the JS doc block there, if you can scroll back up to that.
Sure.
This will all appear in autocomplete. So if you were to create this function here as a custom function, the autocomplete would show you the multiplies input value by 2 as a quick description. It would tell you that input is a number parameter that is the value you're going to multiply. It works really quite nicely. It's a nice new feature.
Very helpful. And as a heads up, the number and date formatting is going to change. So new Sheets follows more closely to Excel's number format specification. Certain things like how lowercase m is for both months and minutes, depending on what precedes it, etc., are different. So just look at our blog post to see the exact specifics of that change.
Yeah. I think one other thing that people are going to run into is that for certain types of operations, open-ended ranges like get range a:/b don't work very well at the moment. It's much safer in the new version of Google Sheets, at least for now, to use to specify a range accurately, like A1 to B5. If you really need an open-ended range, you should probably stick to the old version of Sheets. But what you can experiment with is just over-declaring your range. So if you only need if you need all of column A and column B, and you're sure you're never going to be over 100 rows or over 1,000 rows, go from A1 to B100 or A1 to B1,000, and that'll work.
Or as noted here, you can use sheet.getLastRow.
Of course, yes, that's the correct way to do it. Yeah, I wrote the documentation myself and totally forgot what the correct advice is.
Okay, and another exciting announcement that we have: new advanced services in AppScript. So as you know, in addition to our basic services like Spreadsheet app, Document app, we have advanced services which are for services like Fusion tables. As you'll see, we're just announcing more of those services in AppScript. So that includes Admin SDK, Fusion tables, Google+, Mirror, the new Glass API, so that's exciting, and also YouTube and YouTube Analytics.
The reason these are advanced services is that there's kind of two reasons we call them advanced services. One, you have to explicitly enable them; they're not sort of on by default like the built-in AppScript services. And two, the way you code against them is a little different. They really, especially now under the new scheme that we rolled out here, very closely follow the structure of the APIs as you would access them outside of AppScript.
And also more closely mirror when you're working in JavaScript APIs in general, using the dot notation to go into parameters instead of using getters and setters, which are more normally the paradigm for other programming languages.
Yeah.
And you'll see those changes and others as well in our blog post. We run through an example here of using one of the APIs. It's very natural, and one of the big benefits to this is that it doesn't require duplication of documentation that might get out of date on this end or on the actual API documentation itself. You'll be able, if you're familiar with the API, it should be very natural for you to use that in the AppScript environment. And if you're not familiar with it, you'll be able to go to the most up-to-date source of the documentation and use the methods just like you expect.
Yeah. And just a reminder, our blog is available at googleappsdeveloper.blogspot.com, or just Google the phrase Google Apps Developer blog. The other change that came sort of part and parcel with this, the addition of these new services, is that we've changed the default syntax for the new advanced services. The old syntax still works. If you used the 6 advanced services that we had previously, analytics, prediction, tasks, those kinds of things, we were constructing a getter and setter notation that was sort of like the way sorts of things you're used to in AppScript. We were constructing them programmatically from the existing external APIs. And now we've gone to match the way that the external APIs are presented in other languages. So the old getter-setter methods still work, but you won't find them in autocomplete. Instead, once you toggle on one of the advanced services, the autocomplete will show you the same methods and objects as you'll find in those services' own documentation.
For example, you can use this like user.primary email, user.id, and you don't need to refer to the getters and setters specifically. Okay, perfect. I think let's move on to release notes now. As you know, we have been working a lot on launching these great new features. So we don't have too much to cover as far as the rest of the release notes. Let me just quickly go over what we did change. So some of you that were embedding AppScript gadgets in Google Sites, there was an issue where the yellow warning bar was displayed, and this is most often if it's like a Google Apps for Business a setting like that. Now, regardless of what it is, that warning bar should no longer be displayed.
And that was the warning bar that sort of said this app was built by someone other than Google, but that's sort of already clear once people are on your site.
Right.
And we've now gotten rid of that. Thanks for the feedback there.
So we added some paragraph styles to the document tab.paragraph heading enumeration. So now you'll be able to set title and subtitle styles as well. And a couple of removals. Removed sites have delete site. Unfortunately, this method we don't think was ever quite fully implemented to where it was properly functioning. So for the future, we removed this method. URL fetch app, now preserves RFC escaping, and then fix some edge cases. These are some complicated situations, I think, to get over there, but it's generally when you're calling into a library that exposes its function that calls back into the library.
I think people who had these issues will recognize them from the description, and people who didn't have them, they were lucky and unlikely to run into that strange edge case.
Right. Okay. Let's.
Yeah, as always, just thanks for these great issue reports. And when you run into what you believe is a bug in AppScript, please go to our issue tracker, which, as always, you can find just by Googling AppScript issue tracker, and file a bug with as much repro code as you can. No external dependencies. Just make it really easy for us to see what's going on, and we'll do everything we can to address it promptly.
Because sometimes it might be easier to see the bug within your particular setup, your environment, but it's harder for us to replicate it. Say you're in a domain, say you're sharing with like 7 other people. I don't know what the specific use case there might be, but in order for it to reproduce that could be hours of work. Whereas, if we got a script that didn't have external dependencies that we could just copy over and run, we could see it very quickly if it's a bug or not, and easily triage it. Yeah. So that helps us out a lot. And also, please search for existing issues and star them instead of just directly going and creating a new one. We do prioritize just based on how many users are affected by these issues. So that helps us as a signal as well. All right, let's move on to Q&A.
Sure. We had a few questions from the community here.
Do we have anyone on the Hangout? Looks like we have 1 or 2 people.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you have any questions, please speak up. We'll leave the mics on, and in lieu of that, we'll get to some questions that we have on the moderator page here.
Yeah. Just a reminder for anyone who's watching live on YouTube, if you go to developers.google.com/live/drive, you can see the listing for this show, and there's a Google moderator page embedded in that page that lists written questions for the community, and that's what we're going to read now.
Okay. So the first question here is driveapp.getEditors.
The English here is a little bit broken, but I believe the sense of the question here is when you call driveapp.getEditors, it returns the email address correctly if you are the owner of the document and you have shared it to other people within your domain. Then you can get their email address easily. However, if you share a document to people outside your domain, in certain circumstances anyway, then you can't always get their email addresses back. Essentially, the value returned by whether the
command.
Yeah, the getEditors returns a user object, and that user object has a getEmail method on it. GetEmail doesn't always return an email address for users outside of your domain.
Right.
That's by design.
Yeah.
This is a security consideration to respect people's the settings for email address visibility that people set up in Google+. And we always allow you to see the addresses of other people within your Google Apps domain, but there are situations in which documents can be shared to other users, and you're able to see that user has access to the document, but not what their email address is. So we don't want to expose extra information.
And this closely mirrors to how emails are handled in the rest of the Google ecosystem. if you will. If someone is not explicitly sharing their email with you, it's not great practice to allow you to have that. So we hope that this is a more comprehensive plan. So going forward, this will be the limitation.
Yeah. Now there are cases in which you can see an external user's email address when they're shared outside, when a document is shared outside your domain, but basically that person has to have shared their email address with you on Google+.
Right.
I wrote a test script earlier today that showed that you can get that, but the user has to have explicitly authorized it through their Google+ settings page.
Okay. Next question here comes from Jonathan Broughton. Can a domain admin authorize a script globally but still run as domain user? On Google Apps for Business, the global domain OAuth credential is theoretically at least approved for all scopes. Can we avoid users being prompted for auth as we can for App Engine apps? What this question is asking is that when you're in a domain, can you create a script that you can still run as the end user, but still be available only in the domain? Is that the idea that you're getting as well?
Yeah, I think there's two possible readings here. Unfortunately, the answer is no for both of them. So I think Jonathan might be asking whether domain admins can then essentially pre-authorize a given script for all users in their domain. Unfortunately, that isn't possible, but it's a good feature request. And if it isn't on the AppScript issue tracker now, do feel free to file it there. And if enough other users start, we'll look at it as a future addition. And the other possible reading is to have the script running as a user within the domain, but authorized. Well, I guess so. As I think Jonathan knows, because he's a great user of AppScript, when you publish a script as a web app, you can decide whether it is going to run with the developer's credentials, that is you, or the user who accesses the app. And depending on your domain settings, it may or may not be possible to expose a web app publicly to the whole world while having it run as the developer. Domain administrators can lock that setting down, and so that's up to the domain admin. But generally, anything that would prompt a user for auth will always prompt a user for auth. There is no way for a domain admin to pre-authorize a script on a user's behalf at the current time. The only thing that a domain admin can do is say this script is going to run as me if it's a web app, and in that case, people won't get prompted for auth.
Okay. Gives Pop Noodle. Thank you.
That's
one of the questions here, and also hello. Well, hello back. Another legitimate comment here. Thanks for the new Google spreadsheet. Currently, there are many quirks in script for new spreadsheet, but my question is about a feature, not a bug. Is there a chance that we will have UI panel like in Docs that was mentioned on IO 13? So what this question is referring to is of course the sidebar functionality that we added to our Docs service. You can create the UI in HTML service and then just say document app.getUI.show show sidebar, and then provide that HTML file. And this question is asking whether that will come to the new sheet service that was just announced.
Because today, just for context, Google Docs and Google Forms can show dialog boxes and sidebars, but Google Sheets has a different API that only allows you to show dialog boxes right now, not sidebars.
Right. And yes, we are working on this functionality. Nothing to announce/release at this time, but stay tuned.
Yeah.
And
this is very important to us.
Yeah, and it's very important. We want to have a consistent API across all of our containers, be it documents, forms, or spreadsheets, and we want to enable the same kind of interaction with them that you would expect. So we're working on it.
Yeah.
And
keep in mind that the new version of Google Sheets was just sort of announced at opt-in status just a week ago. There's quite a few things that are that were still being worked on, but as that product develops and as AppScript's integration with it develops, we should have more new goodies for you.
Right. obviously, the performance considerations and missing features from the previous release are first on the priority list, but we're working on it. Thanks for your input. If you have any other questions, continue to post here. Let's jump back to the Hangouts now and see if there's anyone else there.
Just a reminder to people as well, even if you haven't set up, haven't opted into the new Google Spreadsheets, but you're working with another user who has, and they've created a new Google Spreadsheet and shared it to you, you're going to be using the new Google Spreadsheets for that one document. If an external user, if a separate user has created a new Google Spreadsheet and shared it to you. They look slightly different. The default sizes for columns and rows is a little bit different, and there's a few other visual cues that can sort of tell you which one you're working in.
Also, you'll see the new Google Sheets kind of
logo in the
logo
there's a little check
at
mark.
the bottom right.
Yeah. So even if you haven't opted into the new Google Sheets, if you're a heavy spreadsheet user and other people in your domain or the people you're working with outside a domain have opted into the new Google Spreadsheets, be aware that you might run into it unexpectedly. And so it's a good idea to take a look at our known issues page for AppScript if you're writing scripts against those spreadsheets.
All right. Was anyone on the Hangouts there? Any questions there?
I guess AppScript's working perfectly for everyone this month. Or alternately, it is very close to the holidays here. And
everyone's enjoying their holidays.
Not thinking about AppScript.
Hey guys, this is your producer, Eric. We actually have a question coming in from our YouTube comments from Rory O'Connor. He asks, what would be the best way to test the AppScript Mirror API in the browser, i.e. Google Glass View?
Right, okay. So we've got a question. I'm not sure if you guys could hear that over YouTube.
I couldn't really hear it. So.
There was a question from a user about Google Glass View. I actually haven't worked with the Mirror API much here. Really, using the Mirror API requires that you have a Google Glass device of your own. This is true for the external Mirror API and for the integration in AppScript. So if you have a Glass device, using the new Mirror API with it, unfortunately I don't have Glass, so I haven't been able to do that. But it sounded to me like the question was sort of people experimenting with Glass just in the browser, and I don't believe that you can. I'm going just off my assumptions here, but I don't believe that you can usefully use the Mirror API without a Glass device.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question, but generally, if are they using like a demo Glass service in order to test out their
Unfortunately, this is a bit third-hand to me.
Okay. Well, in any case, we'll get this clarified out, and then we will provide you an
We
answer.
are really excited about the new Mirror API in Glass. So I think Rory was your name. If you've got, if you want to send a question to the AppScript issue tracker, we can, or perhaps the Stack Overflow is actually a better place, since it sounds like a more generic
or community actually.
Yeah, the AppScript community on Google Plus would be a great place as well. Send in a question there, and we'll see if we can get you some help using the Mirror API with Google Glass. Because I know Arun on our team has done some cool stuff with it, and I'm sure he'd be happy to help.
All right. If we have no more questions, I think we should call that a wrap. Hope everyone has a safe and warm or snowy, whichever you prefer, holiday season. And please join us next year, and we'll have other great launches, exciting stuff coming up. So please tune back for the January edition.
From Google Apps Unscripted, this is Dan Lazen.
This is Kalyan Reddy.
And goodbye.